Welcome to Mr. Beats-Idiots at Work. This is where you will see your moment compilations. Alright, picture this. You're standing in the middle of a massive forest, surrounded by trees taller than skyscrapers, birds chirping like it's a nature commercial, and the air smells like pure, unfiltered oxygen. It's beautiful, right? Well, here's the thing. This could be the last time you stand in a forest like this. Why? Deforestation is tearing down these massive ecosystems at a terrifying rate, and it's heating up our planet in the process. Forests are basically the lungs of our planet. They absorb carbon dioxide, CO2, produce oxygen, and provide habitats for millions of species. But every time a tree gets chopped down or burned, that's not just one tree gone. That's the equivalent of a huge chunk of the planet's natural carbon sink vanishing. No trees equals no oxygen equals more CO2 equals a hotter planet. Simple math, right? But here's the kicker. Deforestation isn't just happening in some far-off, remote rainforest. It's happening everywhere. And this isn't just about saving cute animals or preserving beautiful landscapes. Deforestation is directly contributing to global warming and climate change. So, let's break down just how bad this situation is, why it's happening, and what we can do about it. Okay, let's hit you with some cold, hard numbers. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, the world loses about 10 million hectares of forest every single year. That's roughly the size of Iceland. Gone. Every year. To give you a sense of the scale, that's about 30 soccer fields every minute. Every single minute. Now, if you're not impressed yet, let me break it down even further. The Amazon rainforest, which is often referred to as the lungs of the earth, is disappearing at an alarming rate. In 2020 alone, Brazil lost 11,088 square kilometers of the Amazon, an area nearly the size of Lebanon. Just let that sink in. That's not just trees being cut down. That's a carbon bomb waiting to explode. The Amazon stores around 90 billion metric tons of carbon. When those trees are chopped down or burned, all that carbon is released back into the atmosphere, fueling climate change. Now, let's talk about the reasons behind all this tree-murdering madness. Why are we cutting down forests at such an insane rate? Well, the short answer, money. But let's break it down. Agriculture and livestock. The biggest reason for deforestation is agricultural expansion. We need land to grow crops, especially for commodities like palm oil, soy, and cacao. And let's not forget cattle ranching. According to the World Wildlife Fund, WWF, cattle ranching accounts for about 80% of deforestation in the Amazon. Cows gotta eat, right? Well, the demand for beef and leather is contributing massively to the loss of forests. In Brazil, the Amazon is being cleared to make room for soy plantations and cattle. And since soy is used to feed animals, mostly in factory farms, the cycle of deforestation is tied directly to your Big Mac and that delicious steak. So yeah, that hamburger you had for lunch could literally be the reason why some poor orangutans lost their home. Logging, illegal logging is another huge culprit. Big corporations and shady operations chop down valuable hardwoods for timber, which ends up in furniture, flooring, and even paper products. Global Witness reported that around 90% of logging in the Amazon is illegal. That's like buying a stolen bike on Craigslist, except instead of a bike, it's a piece of Earth's lungs. Who knew those fancy wooden desks were costing the planet so much? Mining. When we're not chopping down trees, we're digging up the ground. Mining operations, especially in places like the Congo Basin, result in massive deforestation. Gold, diamonds, and other minerals are extracted from forests, leaving massive scars in their wake. And here's the kicker. Often, these areas are not just cleared to mine minerals, but also to make room for roads, which just leads to more destruction. It's a vicious cycle. Infrastructure. Let's face it, humans love to build stuff. Roads, highways, cities, you name it. And guess what? All these projects require land. Deforestation often happens because governments and companies clear forests to make way for infrastructure, with little regard for environmental impact. We get it, cutting down trees sounds bad. But what's the real environmental impact? Well, let's just say that when we chop down forests, it's not just the trees that suffer. It's everything else too. Carbon emissions. Forests are carbon sinks, which means they absorb more carbon than they release. When we cut them down or burn them, all that carbon gets released into the atmosphere. In fact, deforestation accounts for about 10% of global carbon emissions, more than all of the world's cars, trucks, and airplanes combined. So yeah, chopping down a single tree is like driving your car for 1,000 miles. Multiply that by billions of trees and bam, you've got a massive carbon bomb. Biodiversity loss. Forests are home to over 80% of the world's terrestrial species. Think about that. The trees, animals, plants, fungi, and microorganisms that call forests home are being wiped out at a rapid pace. When forests are destroyed, species lose their habitats, and often they go extinct. Take the orangutan, for example. As forests are cleared for palm oil plantations, these iconic primates are being pushed to the brink of extinction. But it's not just the cute animals. Entire ecosystems are unraveling. Water cycles disruption. Forests help regulate the water cycle. Trees absorb water, release it back into the atmosphere, and help keep rainfall levels steady. When forests are destroyed, it disrupts the local and even global water cycles. This can lead to drier conditions, which makes droughts more frequent and severe, and in turn exacerbates climate change. Soil erosion. Tree roots help keep soil in place, but when the trees are gone, the soil starts to erode. Without the tree's root systems to anchor the earth, the topsoil gets washed away, which makes it harder for plants to grow. This leads to degraded land, which means less food for everyone. You thought losing trees was bad? Try losing the land underneath them too. But wait, there's more. Deforestation isn't just hurting the environment. It's also hitting people hard, especially indigenous communities who depend on forests for their livelihoods. Indigenous rights. Indigenous people make up only 5% of the world's population but are responsible for protecting about 80% of the planet's biodiversity. Forests are their homes, and they have been living sustainably in these ecosystems for thousands of years. But with deforestation on the rise, their homes are being destroyed, and they're losing access to the land they've always depended on. Plus, their voices are often ignored in discussions about land rights and conservation. Livelihoods. Many people in forest-dependent communities rely on the forests for their livelihoods, whether it's through farming, hunting, or sustainable logging. When forests disappear, so do these income sources. In some cases, deforestation has led to conflict as people fight for access to the land. Alright, so now that we've painted the doom and gloom picture, let's talk solutions. Is there any hope for the forests? Actually, yes. There are plenty of efforts underway to curb deforestation and restore what's been lost. Reforestation projects. Many countries, nonprofits, and businesses are investing in large-scale reforestation projects. For instance, in Costa Rica, the government has been paying landowners to replant trees, resulting in a massive 25% increase in forest cover since the 1990s. If we can plant back some of what we've lost, it could go a long way toward reversing climate change. Sustainable agriculture. There's a growing movement towards sustainable farming practices that don't require clear-cutting forests. This includes techniques like agroforestry, where trees and crops are planted together, and permaculture, which can help reduce the demand for land. Plus, companies like Mars and Nestle are starting to adopt deforestation-free sourcing policies for things like palm oil and cocoa. Protecting indigenous land rights. Protecting the land rights of indigenous communities is key to stopping deforestation. Indigenous people have been the best stewards of forests for centuries. Giving them a seat at the table in conservation discussions and recognizing their land rights can help protect both the forests and the people who rely on them. Consumer action. Finally, we can all do our part as consumers. By being conscious of the products we buy, especially those containing palm oil, soy, and beef, we can help reduce demand for deforested land. When we choose sustainable brands and support reforestation efforts, we're voting for a greener, more sustainable future. Deforestation is a massive driver of climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental degradation. But it's not too late to reverse the damage. If we come together to protect forests, invest in reforestation, and shift to more sustainable ways of living, we can give the planet a fighting chance. So, next time you take a deep breath of fresh forest air, remember, it's not just the trees we're saving, it's the entire planet. Let's stop the chainsaws, plant some trees, and leave a legacy that future generations can actually enjoy.
Agriculture.
The simple, wholesome image of a farmer plowing his fields, crops swaying gently in the breeze, and a barn full of cute animals. Except, plot twist, this idyllic vision has nothing to do with industrial agriculture. In fact, the rise of industrial farming has been one of the most destructive forces on Earth in the last 100 years. It's like the farm version of a Marvel villain. It looks harmless, but behind the scenes, it's wrecking the planet. You might be wondering, how is farming bad for the environment? Isn't it supposed to feed us? And while farming does indeed provide food for billions, it's also responsible for a significant chunk of climate change, air pollution, deforestation, and biodiversity loss. The industrial agricultural system we've built is unsustainable and hugely damaging to the planet. But don't worry, I'm not just here to depress you. We're going to break down the issue, make it digestible, pun intended, and even look at what's being done to fix it. Let's start with some mind-blowing numbers. Industrial agriculture is responsible for around 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions. That's 1/4 of the total. And it's not just about methane from cows or fertilizers, it's about the entire supply chain. The fertilizers, the pesticides, the transportation of food, the deforestation to make space for crops and livestock, and the energy-intensive farming practices that drive emissions. To give you an idea of how large industrial agriculture's footprint is, consider this: livestock alone accounts for about 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, according to the United Nations. That's more than all of the world's cars, planes, and trains combined. Now that's a power move. If the power move is destroying the planet. And it doesn't stop there. Industrial agriculture uses about 70% of global freshwater resources. Yes, 70%. That's a huge chunk of the world's freshwater going into crop irrigation, livestock, and food production. Yet, the problem isn't just about how much water we use, it's also about how inefficiently it's being used. For example, it takes about 2,000 to 5,000 liters of water to produce just 1 kilogram of beef. To put that into perspective, that's the equivalent of showering for 5 to 10 days straight. Yes, your cheeseburger is thirsty. Now that we've got the big numbers out of the way, let's break down exactly how industrial farming is wreaking havoc on the planet. Monocropping, the one-crop nightmare. Monocropping, or growing a single crop on vast stretches of land, is a hallmark of industrial agriculture. At first glance, it might seem efficient. After all, if you grow one crop over and over again, it should be cheap to produce, right? Wrong. Monocropping causes a ton of environmental problems. For one, it's terrible for the soil. Growing the same crop year after year depletes the soil of essential nutrients, which means more fertilizers and chemicals are needed to keep the crop growing. This leads to soil degradation, erosion, and reduced biodiversity. Not only that, but monocropping reduces the resilience of the ecosystem, leaving it vulnerable to pests, diseases, and extreme weather events. The most famous example of monocropping is the cornfields of the U.S. Corn is grown on more than 90 million acres of land in the U.S. alone. That's a lot of corn and a lot of fertilizer, water, and pesticides. The issue? Corn isn't exactly great for the soil, and the monocropping system forces farmers to rely heavily on chemicals, which then run off into rivers and lakes, causing water pollution and harm to aquatic ecosystems. Synthetic fertilizers, feeding the crops, poisoning the earth. In the world of industrial agriculture, chemical fertilizers are the go-to method for boosting crop yields. But while these fertilizers increase productivity, they come with a dark side: pollution. Fertilizers like nitrogen and phosphorus are essential for plant growth, but when they're overused, they leach into the soil and eventually into waterways, causing a whole host of environmental problems. Take the Gulf of Mexico, for example. Every year, the Mississippi River dumps millions of pounds of fertilizer into the Gulf, creating a dead zone where oxygen levels are so low that marine life can't survive. This happens because the excess nutrients in the water fuel the growth of algae blooms, which then die off and decompose, using up all the oxygen in the process. It's a massive environmental disaster, and it all stems from the overuse of synthetic fertilizers. But the problems don't stop there. Nitrogen-based fertilizers also contribute to global warming because they release nitrous oxide, a potent greenhouse gas. In fact, nitrous oxide has a global warming potential 300 times greater than CO2. So, that field of soybeans that you thought was helping the world's food supply? Yeah, it's actually contributing to global warming in a pretty serious way. Livestock, the moving climate culprit. When it comes to industrial agriculture, livestock is one of the biggest offenders. You've probably heard the phrase farting cows in connection with climate change, and as ridiculous as it sounds, there's some truth to it. Cows, and other ruminants like sheep and goats, produce methane when they digest food. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas. It's about 28 times more effective at trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide over a 100-year period. But it's not just the methane from cows that's the problem. It's also the land use change that comes with livestock farming. For example, in Brazil, vast swathes of the Amazon rainforest have been cleared to make room for cattle ranching. And let's not forget the energy-intensive process of growing and transporting livestock feed. Growing soybeans and corn for animal feed requires massive amounts of land, water, and chemicals, which contribute to deforestation, water pollution, and carbon emissions. On top of all that, industrial livestock farming often involves factory farming, where animals are kept in cramped, unsanitary conditions and are pumped full of antibiotics and hormones. This not only leads to animal welfare concerns, but also contributes to antibiotic resistance, which is a serious public health risk. Pesticides, killing bugs, and everything else. Pesticides are another crucial aspect of industrial agriculture. These chemicals are used to control pests and diseases that threaten crops. However, the widespread use of pesticides has a number of harmful consequences. First, they kill a wide range of insects, not just the pests they're intended for. Bees, butterflies, and other pollinators are all at risk from pesticide exposure. Pollinators are essential for crop production, so without them, we'd be in big trouble. In fact, the decline in bee populations due to pesticide use is a direct threat to food production. Some estimates suggest that 75% of flowering plants depend on pollinators like bees, meaning if they go, so do many of our fruits, vegetables, and nuts. But that's not all. Pesticides also contaminate soil and water, leading to long-term environmental damage. They can poison aquatic ecosystems, harm wildlife, and, if they enter the food chain, pose health risks to humans. Not to mention, pesticide-resistant pests are becoming a growing problem, which means farmers have to use even more chemicals to fight back. We've covered some of the environmental problems caused by industrial agriculture, but it's also important to talk about the broader social impacts. Industrial farming is not only changing the planet, it's also affecting people's lives. Land grabbing. Large agribusinesses are often responsible for land grabbing, where land that was once used by small farmers or indigenous communities is taken to make way for industrial farms. This has led to displacement and loss of livelihoods for millions of people around the world. In some countries, land grabbing has fueled violent conflicts, as communities fight to protect their land and resources. Worker exploitation. Industrial agriculture relies on a huge workforce, often made up of migrant laborers who are paid low wages and work in dangerous conditions. Workers on factory farms are subjected to grueling hours, poor living conditions, and exposure to harmful chemicals. This exploitation is a direct result of the push for cheap, mass-produced food. Health impacts. The overuse of pesticides, fertilizers, and antibiotics in industrial agriculture has been linked to a number of health problems in both farm workers and consumers. These chemicals can cause respiratory issues, skin conditions, and even cancer. Additionally, the use of antibiotics in livestock farming has contributed to the rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, posing a serious threat to human health. Now for the big question. Can we fix industrial agriculture? While it's clear that we need to make major changes, there are a number of promising solutions on the horizon. Regenerative agriculture. This approach focuses on restoring soil health, increasing biodiversity, and reducing the need for chemicals. Practices like crop rotation, agroforestry, and using cover crops can help restore the land while producing food sustainably. Plant-based diets. Shifting toward plant-based diets can have a huge impact on reducing the environmental footprint of agriculture. Plant-based foods generally require fewer resources, water, land, energy, than animal products, and they generate fewer emissions. The rise of plant-based alternatives like Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat is a step in the right direction. Sustainable farming practices. Supporting sustainable farming practices, such as organic farming and local food systems, can help reduce the environmental impact of food production. Local food systems cut down on the carbon emissions associated with transporting food long distances, and organic farming reduces reliance on synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. Policy changes. Governments can play a big role in changing the system by implementing policies that support sustainable farming, reduce subsidies for harmful practices, and invest in research for innovative, eco-friendly farming techniques. Industrial agriculture is a major driver of climate change, environmental destruction, and social inequality. But it's not an unsolvable problem. By shifting to sustainable, regenerative, and more ethical farming practices, we can reduce the impact of agriculture on the planet. It's not going to be easy, but with the right policies, consumer choices, and innovations, we can fix the broken system and make farming work for both people and the planet. And that's our deep dive into industrial agriculture and its impact on climate change.